And we are back. Thank you for staying with us. We are now in the part two portion of our lovely talk that we've been doing with Miss Cecile. We're talking about self-care strategies for educators, how educators can make empowered decision for their well-being and for them to sustain themselves throughout their lives. So we're continuing with the poster that you just saw before, and the next point on the program on the poster is stop comparing yourself, especially on social media. Focus on your own story. So we talked a little bit of about social media in part one, but Cecile, stop comparing yourself on social media. This is linked to what you were talking about, keeping up with the Joneses, right?
Yes, I think part of it is that certainly we're living in a time now and a culture now that is very commercialized, and part of the way that people sell goods is by making people think that they're not enough, by making people think that they need more. And so that is part of the way marketing is done. And many people fall into that. So you need more of everything, bigger of everything. And if you believe that, and if you believe that that's what you need to be a better person, to be more attractive, to be complete, then you're really going to fall into, in line with that. The only thing I can tell people is what I said, in the part one, which is to determine what really is important to you. What are the things that bring you joy? And to do those things, because some people find that if they really think about it, they don't need the long fingernails and spending 2-3 hours waiting to get the nails done, because they would rather spend that time maybe with their kids, or they would rather spend that time reading, or they'd rather spend that time, in their garden, or in their bathtub taking a soak. So you have to look at that you value. And really and truly, are you doing it for you, or are you doing it because you think somebody else wants you to do that? I think people have always been comparing themselves with other people. I'm not sure that there's a way we will get around that, but I think we're living in a time now where that seems to be at a premium. And you just have to find yourself. You just have to figure out what is it that I want, and do that thing.
All right. And we're just talking about keeping up with the Joneses. We're talking about comparing myself with maybe another teacher in real life and also on social media. We mentioned in part one that many of these posts that we see on social media is really a manufactured just a way of life. It is not reality. And the truth be told, even in real life, I have a coworker or I have a neighbor, and when we see them out in public, they may also have a manufactured way of doing things. But when you see them behind closed, it's a different story. It is a different story. So try your very best not to compare yourselves, because you'll never know what their story is. I do remember once that I was just came back from church speaking to a friend of mine, and he saw a young girl, maybe in her early 20s, driving a very expensive car. In Jamaica, expensive car would be like the normal BMW, Beamer, or a Mercedes Benz. It was one of those top of the line cars, and he said, wow, I just can't imagine what she did in order to get that. And I said, what do you mean by what she did? Sometimes you don't know how people get their things, so don't look and then say, boy, I wish I could. Because if you look in their lives and realize what they have done, sometimes it's not the best thing that they have done in order to gain what they have. But sometimes you do have people that really work hard. And like you say, Cecile, sometimes we are not willing to work that hard.
No.
We are not willing to burn the midnight oil. Oh no. So don't look at what others have if you're not willing and able to sacrifice what they did in order to achieve.
Right. Because, even when he made that comment, she could have been driving her father's car, you know.
Exactly.
He, she could have
Or her
been,
mother's car.
or her mother's car, she could have been moving the car for a friend. So there's so many ways to interpret that snapshot of time that you've seen. And as you say, there are lots of people who you see them, they live one way or appear one way, but the people who really know them, the people who really interact with them, I mean, we can think of even now with the Me Too movement and people becoming more aware of, a range of prejudices and a range of ways that people treat people in ways that are disrespectful or dishonorable. We see so many stories of people coming forward to say, I mean, look at Ellen, for example. There's been a whole backlash with
There you
her.
go.
People talking about
There
how
you
she really
go.
treats staff, you know.
Mhm.
There have been incidents in the past where people have spoken about how Beyonce treats her staff. So you may see this
Mhm.
person all wonderful, glamorous, smiley, kind on screen, but are they screaming, shouting, and awful human beings to interact with if you're having to deal with them in real life?
Life.
Because
Mhm. Mhm.
not the on TV real life, but
Mhm.
you know what they're like when the cameras are off. So
Mhm.
there is that, you know. And then again,
There
there's
is
some.
one thing that, yes, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and then again, there are some people who are able to concentrate all of their life in a short span. So they've determined that for this 1 year or this 2 year period, I'm going to just max it out. I'm going to do everything that I want to do. I'm going to live this really amazing, to use the word that a lot of young people like to use these days, amazing life. But they know that after that period of time, they're going to have to recalibrate, they're going to have to
Mhm.
reorganize, because it cannot be
Mhm.
sustained based on what they're currently
Right.
engaged in. You are
Absolutely.
going to say.
And there was a friend of mine that did a social media course. And during that course, he said that if you're going to go on social media, especially for the long term, it's always best to portray your life as authentically as possible on social media, or else you'll be found out.
Oh,
You'll
easily.
be looked up as a hypocrite because you're actually living your real life one way, and on social media you are, portraying yourself as a pristine human being, which no one is. So
Right.
just be mindful of that and be careful of that comparison
i
that
think
we're
i think
tempted.
the recent the recent revelations of the Smith family, for example, Jada and
Mm-hmm.
Will Smith, as I
Yes.
said, people are going through things at different points in their life, and you're pretending that, the rumors aren't true. You're pretending that everything is perfect. And then 2, 3 years down the line, it comes out that
Mm-hmm.
what you were saying at the time really wasn't true. And the thing is,
Exactly.
as everybody now should know, if it goes online, it lives
Mm-hmm.
somewhere forever. You you might have
Oh,
posted something and you thought, oh, I got it done quickly enough, but somebody might have screenshot it. And that same thing that you think is no longer available, because there's been a lot of that, certainly in the last year with Black Lives Matter, where people have posted comments, and then when there was a backlash, they quickly took it down. But by that time, 500 people had already taken screenshots, and those 500 people had already
exactly.
shared, who also shared, and so on. So it lives forever. Every now and then we see stories that were 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, resurfacing on WhatsApp, for example, or Facebook, etc. And somebody will say, "But didn't I see
Tomorrow.
that thing, long ago? This is not true. Let's fact check it." But sometimes there's not an opportunity to fact check, and then there you are, happily, busily doing things that somebody else already knew. I didn't really go quite like that, you know.
All right. And the last part for that point on the poster was focus on your own story. try to realize that there's value in everyone's story. So you don't have to really compare yourself to others on social media. You can use your own story. And many people are very shy and very intimidated by social media. They don't want to put all their business out there. That's fine. Find one part of you that you'd like to share, which is maybe it could be your career. Many people like to share relationship advice, so they open up that part of their lives on social media. Whatever you are comfortable with. And like Cecile says, sometimes the social media is not for you. Don't do it. Just
Exactly.
do not create an account and just stay away from it. All right, so let us move on now to the next point that says work on your bad habits and toxic traits. None of us are perfect. There's nothing wrong with personal growth. Love yourself through it. So many of us always believe that, oh, I am perfect, I don't have any toxic traits or any bad habits. But if you can't find any bad habits yourself, then ask the person you live with.
I,
Ask the
I was
person you live with, what
I was
are
about,
your toxic traits?
I was about to say,
Yeah.
if you can't find any bad habits yourself, you're just given evidence of one.
All right, there you go. The mere fact
You
that you
know,
can't find anything wrong is a
means
problem.
that, yeah, that is an indication that all is not well. Um,
All
but
is not well upstairs mentally.
that's it.
Because
That
sometimes we have convinced ourselves in our mind that we're always right, that everything we do
Mhm.
is perfect, and that everybody just should just get off my back. It's always somebody else's fault, and we don't
Yes,
want to take responsibility. Correct? So it
that is true.
starts up here, right?
That
So when we talk about self-care, we're also talking about mental health, right?
absolutely.
So
And
accepting our faults is the first step towards self-care strategy. We have to accept every part of us, the good and the bad. What
I
say you,
think
Cecile?
self-care in terms of the mental health aspect is a real concern. I think globally
Hmm.
there's stigma attached to mental health issues. People often don't want to go and get assistance. In my previous activities, uh, I was privy to being in a situation to observe people finally deciding to get help, often for a
Hmm.
child. And I would say to them, how long has your child been exhibiting this behavior? And in the classroom, I'm sure teachers see behavior that they know immediately is not healthy, is not normal. Um, and I would say to the person, how long was the child exhibiting this behavior? Often they would say 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, sometimes longer.
Wow.
And I would say to them, had the child been experiencing a temperature, a fever, for more than 2 days, you would have taken action, wouldn't you? And they say, oh, yes, of course. I said, if the child had been vomiting or having diarrhea or, was sleepless, suffering from sleeplessness, would you have waited a year, 2 years to get help? No, of course not, is usually the response. But the thing is that mental health issues are often looked at with shame. And in the same way that you need to go to a specialist, whether it's a medical doctor, a naturopathic doctor, or some other care provider for a physical malady, no less attention should be paid to an emotional issue or a mental health issue, because they end up impacting the whole universe of that person who's suffering, in meaningful and long-term and often detrimental ways. So,
Hmm.
when people talk about what's a bad habit? A bad habit may be something like you're, you know, you procrastinate. A bad habit may be that
Are
you
you in my house watching me, Cecile?
or a bad habit may be that you know you should have something because, people who are lactose intolerant, for example, but they just love the taste of cheese. So they will take the pain of the gastric discomfort. Or
Hmm.
the bad habit may be that they just don't like they don't like doing laundry, so they wait until they're down to the last item of clothing before they do the laundry. And if that impacts your life negatively, then that's something that you have to address at some point or another, because it's going to impact your relationships. Toxic traits now, I think, are an escalation where you are doing things that are not only detrimental to you in the way that, not doing your laundry is detrimental to you personally, but it's also causing damage, willful damage to other people. And that those kind of toxic traits can range from things like you always have something negative to say to somebody, you're always trying to put them down, you're always trying to say they're not good enough, their ideas or their feelings are discounted. There are people who take pride in deliberately handling other people's possessions in a careless manner, which causes the other person discomfort. So there are a variety of things that I think go beyond bad habits, which impact you, the individual, to behaviors that impact other people in your universe, in your sphere of influence or impact in ways that are harmful. And there's a good video going around, a Jamaican young man who says, if the person is not behaving right, cut them off. And if you feel that I'm not behaving right to you, cut me off too.
Cut me off.
So you have to be willing to come to terms with what it is that you're doing that's having a deleterious impact on other people. As we say, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Unfortunately, with mental health, people don't understand that it also means that the person is comfortable with being uncomfortable. The person is comfortable with, they think unhappiness and they think misery is normal. So those are also issues that we have to be aware of. If there are teachers in the classroom who relish in making students feel bad about themselves, who relish in making unkind comments to students, who relish shouting and carrying on in a manner that would not be acceptable in other contexts, then there's something wrong and somebody needs to speak up. And often the problem is that people don't want to tackle those issues. People want to say things, certainly in the Jamaican context, we have an expression, as such a stay. I'm sure there are equivalent ways of expressing that in other cultures where people expect you to accept unacceptable behavior because that is characteristic of that individual. Yes, it's characteristic of that individual, but it's also characteristic often of an underlying problem. And sometimes it's just that person it could be something like they're unhappy with themselves. They have their own insecurities that they haven't dealt with, but it also could be a mental health
or it could be that those behaviors were modeled to them at a young age, and they have adopted those behaviors, a pattern of behavior now into adulthood. Correct.
This too is true,
So
because
that's something that they have to.
Right, they don't recognize those behaviors as harmful, and they think that
because those behaviors when they were accepted, it was acceptable behavior because that is what was surrounding them when they were younger. So they've just continued with that kind of behavior, and many times the behavior is toxic. So personal growth is very important, guys. Love yourself through the growth, accept your flaws, and in addition to accepting what is great about you, and learn how to do things better. If you know that you have a fault, if you are married, your spouse complains about a pattern of behavior that is, bothering him, or something that is offending another person, look within yourself and say, am I truly exuding this toxic behavior? What can I do about it? Let me start making some solid steps in moving towards proper behavior and shedding those old ways of doing things. All right, we're moving now to the next point.
I just want to add one point.
Say the next point after this. take control of your finances, save and budget. And so continue to see what you're saying, and we're going to go right into
Right.
taking control
I
of
would
our
I
finances.
would want to say that sometimes the personal growth and getting to that point of recognizing what's wrong and actually changing the behavior means getting professional help. That's what psychologists are there for. That's what social workers are there for. That's what counselors are there for. Get the help that you need. Going to your other point about taking control of your finances. I was a little amused when I saw save and budget if you can. They will tell you that even if you think you can't, you can. You know, because there are certain things that you really do need to be prepared to handle in this life. And if you don't save for them, then it's going to be a little problematic when that time comes. The same way you have alcoholics, unfortunately, there are also shopaholics, and there are people who really don't have their early life, their early experiences, what they saw at home, how their parents handled money was very poor, or they never raised them to understand, the fact that they were earning $20 and that $20 had to cover all of these multitude of needs for the month. So the whole business of taking control of their finances, a lot of people don't want to do it. It's too painful. They would rather be in a situation where they're earning and they're borrowing as they're earning. So by the time the paycheck comes, it's all booked out and they're back on the same borrowing cycle again.
Like they're on the hamster wheel, just going on and around and never making progress, right?
And some people actually, because of their early experiences, think that that's normal. It's okay to go to, and especially in this day and age where credit in a variety of forms is available. People have credit cards, multiple credit cards, people have store cards that are supposed to give them discounts if they spend a certain amount of money. And those store cards are everything from clothing stores to supermarkets. Everybody's trying to get you to spend more because ultimately that's how they make their living. But you have to look at what are the things that are worth your money and what are the things that you absolutely have to buy. So there's a whole range of about between 5 years, 2 years ago, there was a whole movement to being very minimalist. There was a whole movement to being very thrifty. There were, people who were, they coined a word to describe them, frugalistas. So frugal, and the same way you have fashionistas, you had frugalistas, and people gave, a variety of tips and suggestions about how you can make do with very little. That has its role in trying to, especially now with the pandemic, you have to look at, are you going to have a job or a source of income next month? Are you going to have that same source of income in 2 months' time? Because the economy is changing, the world is changing so quickly. We're determining now that some pursuits are not going to earn you the kind of money that you may have projected that you would earn. Everybody in entertainment, for example, they're accustomed to earning a certain volume of funds from live appearances. Those have all but vanished. Certainly for Jamaican performers who have, they haven't been any shows locally. Most of the things that are online are free. And, the kind of money that you can earn from pay-per-view, people who are accustomed to being able to access your material at no cost online will hesitate. And especially if you're an artist that's very exposed, they're not going to be paying you the same kind of money. So getting back to the context of the educators, if part of your income was based on private lessons after school and there is no school, if you have an opportunity and there's still that same need to now take that online, to go digital with that, then it means that you may have to invest in a Zoom account, so you have to pay some money, or you may have to tailor the private lessons to the time constraints of a free Zoom account, for example. And it just means looking at what your reality is. Do you really need the scented toilet paper? Do you need this toilet paper that has aloe on it? Or do you need the one that's providing, the hygiene that you require, but it's not scented and it doesn't have aloe, but it costs you several cents or dollars less? It all adds up. You have to look at a lot of people. One of the biggest money sucks is food waste. I'm sure if I challenge you now, Denise, to go to your fridge, because whatever is in the cupboard is something that can stay. So your canned items will last you for a while. But I'm sure if I challenge you now to go into your fridge, you're going to have food that you cook too much of, so you have it in the fridge as leftovers. And I know many people who have leftovers in their fridge that will never be eaten. They just have it there because something in their training.
Well, we eat our leftovers, especially since the pandemic.
Oh, as you say, especially since the pandemic, but there are a lot of people who
absolutely,
they won't be eating it. There are a lot of people who, if you tell them now, go to their vegetable, the vegetable tray in their fridge, there are things in there that are spoiling. So we actually, there are lots of things that people need to look at and reassess in terms of saving and budgeting. A lot of people have found in the last year that they've saved a lot of money. Entertainment budget is very, very small because you can't go anywhere. A lot of people were thrilled this Valentine's because they said, you save on the expensive dinner. You save on going out to some special event. I know a lot of men who are very happy. You save on clothing. I know a lady who sells clothing, and she says that, especially in the context of the changes in regulations, a number of countries, there are curfews, and even in terms of state work from home. If you're working from home, a number of people have said that, they bought more tops or shirts, but they're not buying pants, they're not buying skirts,
That's right.
A lot of people are
they're not buying
finding that
shoes either.
they're not buying shoes. They're not buying shoes. Women are saving on, some women are saving on makeup because it's, a more minimalist look for the camera. So there are a lot of ways to save, but I think everybody can save definitely by looking again. Just go to your fridge and see what you're wasting and make a note so that when you go to the supermarket, you're not buying quite so much of that thing. You go to your cupboard and you see things that you thought you were going to eat and they've been sitting in there for 2 months, but you're still buying more. Why? That's obviously not something that your family or you are providing, that's giving you any benefit for the money that you've spent. There's a concept in business called just-in-time inventory, where instead of investing or spending money to have a lot of stock sitting in your warehouse, you get it at the time that you need it. So if you're producing soap, instead of having 500 cases of whatever the ingredient is, you manage your production and you plot and plan your productive activities so that you get it in the week that you need it, so you're not tying up cash in material that's just sitting there, unless of course you're getting a special price that you can't miss and you're going to be using it. Because a lot of people get sucked into things like those big box stores. So it's on sale, but it's only of value if you're actually planning to buy it anyway. So don't tell me that you bought something and you saved $20 or you saved $200 or you saved $20,000 when you spent more than you planned to spend in the first place. It's what kind of sale is that?
But there are many times when people are sucked into sales to buy things that they don't really need.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. You didn't plan to spend that money anyway. So if it is a case that, say for example, you decided that you wanted to buy a pair of whatever, some fancy shoes, or you wanted to buy a 100-inch TV or some plasma screen something, or the latest model phone, And so you had planned to buy that item, or you had planned to engage in that activity. And here comes an opportunity for you to do it at half the price, or 20% off, or 10% off. Then you've made a savings. But if you're buying it because it's an impulse purchase,
right,
how does that help you? So yes, you have to save, because there is going to be that rainy day, and there are different schools of thought. You know, you need to have 3 months saving, 6 months saving, 9 months saving. I've seen people talk about having 2 years. I think for the average educator, having a year's savings would be a bit of a stretch, because the reality is what it is that you're taking in each month. How much of that, you know, are you actually able to save? The frugalistas, as I mentioned before, they looked at, and it's a common wisdom. If you're, whatever it is that the amount that you're getting, save 10% of that. And then the rest of it, you figure out how you're going to spend it. And then there's another approach.
So you save first before you spend.
Right. People talk about paying themselves first. So saving first before you spend. And if you do that consistently, even if it's $2, even if it's $20, it adds up. And then there are people who take a 60-40 approach, for example, where 60% of their funds are used to buy, you know, keep life going, pay utilities, food, you know, cover the cost of literally living. And then the portion that you save is divided into things like, if you're planning to take a vacation, or you're saving to buy a house, or, you know, any of those purchases. So people create these pots. And that way, you know, you set targets, and you have the feel good element where you're able to reach a particular savings target. And so, you know, okay, I'd have money to do X or Y. There are different approaches. The internet is filled with options. And I would suggest that you just need to start looking and determine what is going back to what is important to me, and doing those things.
Right. And also having the discipline, because many people don't have the discipline when it comes to saving, budgeting, having a pension plan, all these things. Sometimes you hear stories about persons who have passed away, and what they have handed over to their family is just a whole mountain of debt, and nothing is left for them to bury them, or to take care of hospital bills. You know, so ensuring that you are insured, things like that, health insurance, life insurance.
Yes, there are certain
solid pension plan can help.
There are certain things that I think, for me, as you're talking about pension, I think for me, my approach to old age and pension is a little different from many people that I know. There's some, you cannot save enough money to cover every eventuality of life. So people are talking about, oh, you need to make sure you have at least X amount so that could anybody have predicted that in 2020, 2021, and probably 22, and you know, that life would change as radically as it has? I mean, there are people who, you know, their entire, in 2008, when we had that financial crash, people I know who were getting pensions from the UK, for example, had those pension funds vanished because the management of the funds had not done the kind of minimal risk approach in terms of what they invested in. And so people lost pensions. People lost huge sums of money that they had saved with the expectation that they would have income going, you know, into their old age. So for me, critical things as you look at pension is you should have somewhere to live. Figure it out what you're going to do, whether you're going to share with a friend, because more and more people are finding that they need to consolidate. So, you know, if there are people that you get along really well with, that you would want to age with, there are wonderful stories about people forming their own what is called an intentional community, and that can take different shapes. So it might be that you all buy a piece of land and everybody builds their own little, you know, own house on it, or you make one big house and people find a way of sharing it. So that you having somewhere to live is critical. The whole business of your health. Part of what COVID has proven is that good health is absolutely essential at every age and stage and as you get older. Part of why so many older people have died is because of what quickly became called comorbidities. You are living a life of ill health that's supported by taking medicine. That is not health. So, all the people who are hypertensive or are diabetic, I would strongly urge them and, um, I'm at a loss for words. I would strongly urge you to just reconsider the poor choices that you're making, the bad habits that are making you unwell and unhealthy, and that will keep you unwell and unhealthy because a virus like COVID just loves an unhealthy body. It just, has a field day, and you don't want to be, in that grouping. So the other aspect of getting older and pension is the relationships that you form, the people with whom you determine these are people who are not toxic, who are adding value to my life. They're helping me write a good story. They're helping me be my best self. They're helping me engage with the world in a way that's meaningful and positive. Because those are we have all seen during this pandemic as well, who are hailed as people who, are heroes. All of those people who are willing to go out of their way to go the extra mile, do good things for others, and if you have a lot of those people around you on an ongoing basis, the quality of your life is way different from if you have a lot of money, but people who are around you are really just there because you can pay them. There's a difference between being cared for and receiving care. Because I can come and I can wash your feet for you in a way that's loving. And there's a way that you pay me to wash your foot, so I wash your foot. Quality of
all right.
So I would strongly recommend that, that people look at, this whole business of pension, that it's not just the cash, it's the relationships and your health. And I said, if nothing else, having somewhere that you can lay your head comfortably, even if you're a nomadic tribes have their shelter. They always travel with, somewhere to sleep. So
in their groups, in their community.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. All right, so we're on to the next point on the poster. Go to therapy, and we touched on that point, right? Learn how to process your feelings in healthy ways. Work on your communication. Go to therapy, and I want you to touch on the point on Cecile, the fact that there's such a stigma with going to therapy, especially in the Black community, and some of our educators have this stigma still in our minds. We have these preconceived ideas that if you are in therapy, you're going crazy and you must be mad, and you are ready now to be admitted in on the ward in a mental hospital. And we have to get rid of that stigma. We have to encourage not only our women, because women are more likely to go to therapy than men. Now are ready now to hide behind that macho image, to say, oh, nothing is wrong with me. So the way I process things, the way I make decisions, and the way I behave, even though it is toxic, nothing is wrong with me. That is how men should behave. We should be strong men and aggressive and be strong and able to make a firm decision and a tough decision despite what everybody else, and move on with our lives. So I want you to talk about how that stigma has impacted the Black community and how we as educators can help dismantle those stigmas.
Well, it's going to be a very difficult road, because the scientific research shows that stress actually alters your DNA. So you are having your body and the way you handle all of the environmental challenges is actually impacted generation by generation by generation. of how that stress has been managed. One of the things that I've found interesting recently was the understanding that people go back in stressful situations. You revert to whatever was the stress management technique that you observed as a 6-year-old, as a child. So if you're in an environment where the adults around you are screaming and shouting, or the adults around you are withdrawing, or the adults around you are breaking down into tears, then you unknowingly and without necessarily even deciding that this is how you're going to react, this is what you have learned and this is what you revert to, unless you get the help that you need, unless you go to therapy, and unless you get help process your feet. What are the ways that are useful for you to process the feelings or whatever challenges you're currently experiencing. Working on your communication is also a challenge, because sometimes people don't want to express themselves, or they feel that they can't honestly share what it is what's going on with them, because they're going to be judged in a way that they don't want to be judged. They don't want people to see that side of them. They don't want people to understand that they're not coping, they're not managing everything as they would like to pretend or to appear to be. It's part of the challenge as well is that in addition to the stigma, the available resources are very limited. So you may have a situation where you may want to go for help, but the options are limited in terms of the number of people that are available to you, and the cost sometimes is prohibitive, and also the context. Because say, for example, you are unable to afford a trained psychologist, and you want to go to a counselor. Often that counselor is going to be housed in a religious institution. So it may be a counselor that's affiliated with a particular denomination, a particular church. Now, many of those counselors will speak to you from their understanding of the spiritual side of life. They will speak to you from their national position on certain things, and therefore you will not really get the benefit of expressing yourself in the way or tackling things in a way that would be meaningful for you or would be useful for you, because the first thing may be you shouldn't, if you were this faith, or if you embrace this belief, you wouldn't have that problem, because this version of God would solve the problem for you. So instead of helping,
so the preconceived ideas that Christianity or a religion can help mental illness or help someone that has an issue with mental health.
And some people, there's people need to understand that mental health, especially where there's a chemical imbalance in the brain, is not a spiritual issue. I've seen people talk about people being demon possessed, and they're at conflict with whatever else is happening in the spiritual realm. When what it is that the person is having a psychotic episode. They're having they're schizophrenic. Their chemistry of their brain is not functioning normally, and they need help. There are people,
or it could just be simply that the person is just under stress.
Yes, and they're not,
and going through a divorce.
Right.
And the person is probably a single parent with 3 kids and manage, and at their breaking point. It could be just, just life.
But
it's just life.
Just imagine then that just imagine then that your stress is being caused because you're at the point where you can't manage this relationship anymore, and you go to a counselor who tells you that you're supposed to stay married, and you will say, but I'm unhappy, this is causing me to have sleepless nights, I can't function, I can't think, and they will tell you things like, oh, but life is not about your being happy, life, you're supposed to God doesn't give you more than you can bear, etc. That's not really giving you the help that you need. So I think you have to determine what's the medicine that, especially if you haven't gone off the edge and you're still able to look at yourself and your situation and know that you need help, try to find the help that will actively engage you in such a way that you can learn how to process your feelings, you can learn how to manage. And sometimes chemical intervention is required, meaning you do need to be on medication to help balance those brain chemicals until such time.
And sometimes you just need to know the medicine that feeds your soul. Is it that you need rest? Is it that you just need to eat properly? Because sometimes it's also you're lacking things, vitamins, minerals, nutrition. Sometimes it's just that. Sometimes it's a lack of sleep. So there's lack of sleep.
And the combination of lack of sleep, poor nutrition, and just dealing with additional stress is going to in a place that's very dark and very unhappy and very feeling as if there is no point, and taking in situations where you seem to have nothing good happening in your life, where everything seems to be falling apart, and you're constantly being bombarded with images of people living the high life. You're seeing plates of food that you can't afford just now. Because I'm always amused. People snapping these pictures. They're about to eat the food. Enjoy the food. I suppose we're now at a stage where you can only enjoy the food if you have shared the food virtually, and every now and then I smile because I tease some of my Christian friends by saying, that passage in the Bible that talks about, God spreading this table before me in the presence of my enemies. I always, that is the original show off and brag upon them. That is the original statement of literally showing off, literally saying this is the life I'm living and you're not living it, but
I think historically the fact that you could afford good food determined that you were of a certain station in life. You had a certain status.
You could afford.
So historically that was something that you could show and say, I can afford this,
so I'm better than you.
The spread in my table, right? And I could, boast and say, this is it. And for those who can't eat, oh, sorry for you. Or sometimes they say, come and share, on my table what I can give you.
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, if we have a situation where it's a joining of those two situations, meaning you can afford it and you have all of this bounty and you are able now to share with others, then that's one way. But then I think now the focus is not on sharing. The focus is on just showing and saying I have it and you don't. I think humans have always had this business of showing off and presenting themselves as better because they have access to more. So I'm not sure how we're going to get around that, but I would, and this is where you need to take yourself in hand and put yourself first. You know what you're going through. You know what you're experiencing. You know if you're feeling that you can cope or if you're feeling that you can't. Don't wait until it's so far gone. It's like when I say to my friends, don't wait until you have 10 pounds or 20 pounds to lose. As soon as the pants or the skirt or the dress starts feeling snug, back off on the calories, Change
up. Start a little more or change up your routine.
Don't be eating.
Don't wait until you're over.
Exactly. So in a similar way, Once you determine that,
And many of our teachers are facing depression. I
yes.
put something on my Happy Teachers Facebook group that we have about 2,000 plus teachers in that
Mm-hmm.
group on Facebook. And I put something on it regarding mental health and well being. And the question was, why are you in the teaching industry? Tell me why you've decided to, join the teaching community and why
Yes.
you have stayed. If you've been in the community for 20 years, 30 years, why have you stayed? And the responses that we got, many people were saying that they don't know why. They knew why when they first started, but they've lost their why along the way.
Yes.
Many of them are on the edge, ready to leave, but they don't know where to go, what to do. A bit of confusion there. And you realize that the teachers are stressed from parents, administrators, different stakeholders, and the students stress out too.
Yes.
The
And
students stress out too.
you can imagine somebody in a position of responsibility. 2 weeks ago, I was talking to a colleague, and he pointed out that one of his members of school was the teacher asking the children in the class what they wanted to be. And he said something that sounded too lofty to the teacher. And she told him, no, he couldn't be that thing. And he said that stuck with him. I mean, this is a man now in his 30s, and this incident happened before, what we, our exam that we do at age between that 10 to 12 age group, whether it's Common Entrance or GSAT or, the various versions thereof. But that stuck with him and in fact, she beat him for it. Who was he to say he could be this thing? Who was he to say? And it was she wasn't satisfied until he named a lesser calling. Now clearly that teacher had some things going on in her own life. Perhaps she was frustrated. Right. Perhaps she wanted to be something and got, stuck in teaching. It wasn't her calling. It wasn't something that she had an affinity for, but this was something that she could get into, needed to make a living. And she brought that.
Or perhaps she herself told that at a young age.
Exactly.
That whatever her lofty goals were couldn't be achieved.
Exactly. And people take that into the classroom and they impact hundreds of, students during the course of their lifetime, who often don't have another person in their life who's going to say, no, you can be. No, you don't pay that any mind. That person has their own injuries. Let's see how we can help you. Because he circumnavigated that situation because his parents were very supportive, and his mother, and comforted him when he went home and said that this was what had happened in class that day. A lot of people don't have that from their parents. So those are some of the things that I'm not sure, as I said, that we'll ever really get over the stigma attached with mental health issues. I mean, even, and there's so many negatives that are even in our religious theology, because, if you look in the Bible, all of the people who were mad were demon possessed. All of the, when people were totally distressed, they went over the edge. You look at somebody like the figure that were presented with Judas. I mean, when it struck Judas, what had happened? That's a case of somebody in crisis. He wasn't able to get the help. He was guilty. And so he did what many people do when they feel that every day is going to be the same bad day. Literally, you're stuck in a Groundhog Day situation. In the worst case scenario, you see no future. He decided to end it. And a lot of people do get into those kind of cycles where they see no hope, they see no way out. And educators do also have situations where they see no way out. They're not happy doing what they're doing. They dread going to school one more day. They don't really want to be interacting with students and administration and the other stakeholders. but they don't see a path for themselves. So, I think that kind of leads us to your next point about do the work. Look at what are the skills that you have honed as a result of being a teacher, and determine what else could I do with these skills. There's a whole, there's a whole career. There are people who they like to teach, but they just don't want to be in a classroom of 20, 30, 40 students, as is often the case in our context. You may want to then be a tutor. There are lots of situations where people want tutors for their own children in their own homes or in private situations. A lot
or
of that,
even online.
Or online, yes. A lot of that has become more available. I know one teacher who was approached in the early part of the pandemic last year. And in fact, the parents were so happy with the child's, because the child didn't really like school to start. So they were happy now that the child had an opportunity for one-on-one learning at her own pace. And the parents' position was, this is how they wanted the child to learn. Whatever happened next, if COVID did in fact vanish or not, because they felt that learning was more meaningful and the child could engage with topics and subjects that was of interest to the child, and felt that the teacher now could interact in a more meaningful way. And also they were looking at whether or not the child even needed to do exams, the standard exams. I mean, what was the point of that? Perhaps another thing that people can look at, the things that they've learned from being a teacher and expand on that. If you are the kind of teacher that's very sympathetic to particular causes, you might find that I'm going to do some training in social work, because you already see the signs. You're familiar. A child comes to school every day late or dirty or unprepared for school, no textbooks.
Or hungry.
Hungry. You know that there are social issues, social service issues that need to be addressed in that context. You might decide, I like the way this child mind works. So you might decide psychology is your thing. So you can look at what it is that you already have and build on that. You, as a teacher, you already have, if you're a good teacher, you already have meaningful people skills. You may want to translate that to doing training in a for adults in a company setting, or you may want to train teachers how to, in those communication skills, in developing those people skills. In this day and age,
and public speaking skills, because teachers speak every day.
Every day.
Teachers have a class of students every day that they have to speak to. Public speaking skills are a good way of teaching and training persons in companies. Yeah?
Exactly. And in this day and age where the technology allows us options, so you could actually develop an online course. There are all sorts of contexts online as well, online communities that exist specifically for people who want to develop training courses, and they help you with the marketing and packaging of those courses. So that's something to explore, as well. So you don't have to be stuck in a classroom setting necessarily. If you're a teacher that teaches things to do with food and nutrition, you may want to expand that. You may want to do your own specialty classes. There are people living with for lifestyle diseases. You might want to package up a program where you're giving adults basic information about food,
vegan lifestyle and stuff like that. Yes.
If you're a teacher if you're a physical education teacher, the world is your oyster. You can teach people basic biology. You can teach them about how the muscles and the bones work, things that you need to be doing to remain healthy. You can develop programs. There are so many, unfortunately, in every population worldwide. The obesity rates are ridiculous. Childhood obesity is a major issue. You already have a connection with parents. You already know how to engage those target groups. Develop a program for the children.
Online. Let's take a point. We're gonna look look at the last point on the poster, which is do the work. If something isn't working in your life, figure out how to fix it. And you're actually giving some points right now as to
Exactly.
if there's some teacher going on life after, day after day, it's just a cycle and they find themselves falling out of love of teaching and the whole industry. They can actually use skills to do other things and
Other
fix
things.
it, put
Oh,
in work to
absolutely.
fix and change the trajectory of their lives. So continue with those tips.
Absolutely. And you can, I mean, there's so many contexts. Basic literacy and numeracy skills. There are people, there are companies that have employed people whose literacy skills are not at the level that the company needs them to be, especially if they're evolving. So say, for example, a manufacturing enterprise and people were hired based on their ability to pack boxes or to operate machinery, but that same company is now looking for HACCP certification. They may need to bring some of their staff up to, speed in terms of their literacy skills so that they can read all the signs and they can, when the assessors come and they're asked a question or asked to explain something, they can do so. That's an opportunity for a teacher. If you're a science teacher, that's a great opportunity for you. Some basic, when we see things like, the unfortunate utterances last year with people talking about using bleach to cure COVID, there obviously is opportunity. No,
Who are you talking about, Miss Cecile?
There's obvious opportunity to hold community sessions where you talk to people about, the human body, what's poisonous. I think they're even with more knowledge, there are more gaps. There are certain things that generations before knew those messages seem to be lost. There's some teachers who have excellent classroom management skills, and there's some teachers who have no or very weak classroom management skills. So if you are a teacher that has great classroom management skills, you have an opportunity to teach other teachers how to do that. So, my thing is always, and part of doing the work is examining what are the strengths that you have and where the opportunities lie to use those strengths. So if you're good at something, what are the opportunities? How can you translate that into something that you will enjoy and that people will pay you for? Because ultimately, you're going to have to pay the bills,
Absolutely. All right. It has been a pleasure, Cecile. Cecile gave us a whole walk. Not just a little spoonful, a whole walk full of information, results, and good ideas to what you can do as to take care of yourself. Remember some of the points that we talked about. Mental health is very important. Ensuring that you know the medicine that feeds your soul. Ensuring that you're looking at your diet, your intake of water, and all of that before you even start cutting off and unfollowing people and unjoining certain groups and those groups that causes you to just be upset all the time, or people that you don't necessarily agree with. It's okay to take a step back and to put up boundaries. Also remember that it's okay to go to therapy. It's okay.
Yes.
And now that everyone is going online, you do have some free therapy sessions that people offer, because mental health is at its all-time high because of the pandemic. So go out and find these free resources. Don't home and wallow in self-pity and really press all the time. Go out, take control of your life, put one foot in front of the net and move forward.
Absolutely.
All right. Any parting words, Cecile, as we go?
Just that in every, the classic, we're living in the best of times and we're living in the worst of times. In the worst of times, there are people doing well. And in the best of times, there are people doing poorly. You just have to determine which one you want to be. Do the work in terms of the introspection. Look at your community, look at your environment, and with digital technology, your community could be the world if you wish to make it so. And determine what it is that you have to offer that other people would be interested in accessing, and sell yourself. Use the same groups the same social media avenues to your advantage, you know, and as you said, Venice,
Right. And
present
market
your
yourself.
authentic self. You know, people will
Absolutely.
gravitate to what works.
And people will gravitate to your authenticity. So
Yes.
don't sell your story. Don't think that your story is less than. Everyone has a story, and your story is worth it. You are worth it. So we're finishing the podcast today. Remember to subscribe to our podcast. Follow us on all social media platforms at Happy Teachers JA. And we also have YouTube that we will post the video on. So go to our YouTube channel. That is Venice Irving when you go to YouTube. And we have another YouTube channel called Happy Teachers JA that you can always subscribe and follow us. Thank you, Cecile. Thank you to our viewers
Thank
and to
you
our
for
listeners.
having me.
And we'll come back with another episode with a new guest talking about how you can take care of yourself. So take care, guys. And remember, always remember, once you're a happy teacher, you definitely will turn out students. Take care, and I'll see you next time.